Hello, what's going on, y'all? This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. So I just want to, okay, I gotta adjust my sound a little bit. Well, what's going on, everybody? This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. So I just want to be able to make sure everybody can hear me. So anyway, today we'll be dealing with a topic about Dangerfield Newby. Dangerfield Newby was a former slave from Virginia, but he was also a part of a ally where they were trying to create a slave revolt. So for those of you who think that our ancestors wasn't trying to fight against slavery, they weren't trying to revolt, none of that, you're wrong. Okay? Because history has proven itself that there were those who indeed took the initiative to fight against slavery. There were those who did that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look into his biography about his life, and then I'm gonna give you some few sources that I have. And then with that being said, I'm closing out. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. All right. So if you could see my screen right here. So let's look at the introduction, the life of Dangerfield Newby. Who was Dangerfield Newby? Well, Dangerfield Newby was born in 1815. He died on October the 17th of 1859. He was the oldest of John Brown's raiders, one of five black raiders, and the first of his men to die at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. All right, now here's his life. He was born into slavery in Fauquier County, Virginia. Newby married a woman also enslaved. Newby's father was Henry Newby, a landowner in Fauquier County. His mother was Esli Newby, who was a slave, owned not by Henry but by a neighbor, John Fox. Esli and Henry lived together for many years and had several children, although interracial marriage was illegal in Virginia. Dangerfield was their first child. Dangerfield Newby, his mother, and his siblings were later freed by his father when he moved them across the Ohio River into Bridgeport, Ohio. John Fox, who died in 1859, apparently did not attempt to retrieve Esli, Dangerfield, or any of his siblings. Dangerfield's wife and their seven children remained in bondage. A letter found on his body reveals some of his motivation for joining John Brown and the raid on Harper's Ferry. Dangerfield Newby's wife, Harry Newby, was the slave of Jesse Jens of Arlington or Warrenton, Virginia. She and her children were sold to Louisiana after the raid. Newby had been unable to purchase the freedom of his wife and seven children. Their masters raised the price after Newby had saved the $1,500 that had previously been agreed on. Because all of Newby's other efforts had failed, he hoped to free them by force. Harriet Bonnigan's letters found on his body proved instrumental in advancing the abolitionist cause. On October the 17th of 1859, the citizens of Harper's Ferry set to put down the raid. Harper's Ferry manufactured guns, but the citizens had little ammunition. So during the assault on the raiders, they fired anything they could fit into a gun barrel. One man was shooting 6-inch spikes from his rifle, one of which struck Newby in the throat, killing him instantly. After the raid, the people of Harper's Ferry took his body, stabbed it repeatedly, and amputated his limbs. His body was left in an alley to be eaten by hogs. In 1899, the remains of Newby and 9 other raiders were reburied in a common grave near the body of John Brown in North Elba, New York. All right, so as you can see, As you can see, this was a very tragic story. It was very tragic because this man wanted to free his family. Now go back to the Parter Sequencer Ventrum. Parter Sequencer Ventrum basically means that wherever the status of the mother was, that's what the child was. So if the mother was a slave, then her children or her child would be a slave too. So because even though he was a free man, his family was still in bondage. And the main goal was for him to free his family. So he figured that if he get into these wars or get into the fight, that it would help him to free his family automatically without having to pay the price for it. So yes, he was attempting to do a slave revolt. He was attempting to do that, but it did not become successful for him because at the end he ended up getting killed, amputated, and there was a letter left on his body by his own wife, pleading for her freedom, pleading for him to pay for it so she can be one with him and be united with him. But sadly, she would never get that opportunity to be reunited with her husband, her or her 7 kids. Just give me a second. Let me make sure my sound quality is good. All right. So everything's okay. Cool. All right, then. So let me go ahead and read this letter. Oh boy. All right, letter from Harriet Newby. The following letter was found on Dangerfield Newby's body after the failed Harper's Ferry raid. Brentfield, August 15, 1859. Dear husband, I want you to buy me as soon as possible for if you do not get me, somebody else will. The servants are very disagreeable. They do all that they can to set my mistress against me. Dear husband, you are not the trouble I see these last 2 years. It has been like a troubled dream to me. It is said that the master is in want of money. If so, I know not what time he may sell me. Then all my bright hopes of the future are blasted. For there has been one bright hope to cheer me in all my troubles. That is to be with you. For if I thought I should never see you on this earth, life will have no charm for me. Do all you can for me, which I have no doubt you will. I want to see you so much. The children are all well. The baby cannot walk yet. The baby can step around anything by holding on to it, very much like Agnes. I must bring my letter to close as I have no news to write. You must write soon and say when you think you can come. Your affectionate wife, Harriet Newby. And that was the letter that she sent to her husband. All right, and so here is the reference, and here is the external link. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next article here, which is called John Brown and His Black Allies. All right, so let's go to the beginning of this article. All right, so right here, this article is called John Brown and His Black Allies in North Alliance. Author Hannah N. Gifford. The source is the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography, October of 2002, volume 126, number 4, page 591 to 610. That's where it came from. It was published by the University of Pennsylvania Press, and it could be found on this website which is www.jstor.org. Okay. All right. So now this story deals with John Brown and his black allies and the North allies. Now let's look at the story about John Brown real quick. As John Brown planned the start of his war on slavery in the late 1850s, he sought allies to aid in his Great Crusade. Although a number of white abolitionists supported his effort financially and philosophically, John Brown knew that the people most willing to pick up arms and join him on the ground were black people already enraged in the struggle for freedom. But Brown faced a number of hurdles in gathering such an army. First, he would have to identify and make common cause with black abolitionists. Second, he had to determine where the kind of attack he envisioned would have the best chance to succeed. Brown found both in the network of anti-slavery activists clustered along the length of the Mason-Dixon line. So the Mason-Dixon line is like the upper part of the South, right? Which will be like Maryland, Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, D.C., and I think Delaware, and, just the upper part of the South. All right, Brown knew that the Dred Scott decision of 1857 had radicalized many free blacks. Indignation meetings occurred regularly in the churches. Discussion in the Maryland lecture at the Dred Scott about re-enslaving the free blacks of the state motivated Baltimore's Africans to prepare to defend themselves and their families. With leadership from Baltimore, black conventions held in Ohio were also adopting increasingly revolutionary ideas, fueled by fear and anger over the court's rejection of black citizenship. All the political compromises that had limited the growth of slavery within the Union were avoided by the decision, and with them went any measure of security free blacks might have felt living in a free state. Dred Scott convinced both brown and black abolitionists that slavery would not be ended by legislative or court action. Brown went to seek allies and information to build alliances with the more radical elements of the free African population. He could find radical free Africans in the independent black churches working with the Underground Railroad in Prince Hall Masonic lodges and in the Black Convention movement. Brown knew that this black infrastructure existed, and he recruited support among its members, especially in centers of radical free black activity like Baltimore and Philadelphia. Baltimore had the largest free black community in the South. Brown's allies with Baltimore connection included Frederick Douglass, Reverend William J. Watkins, and the pastor's niece, Frances Watkins, a novelist and poet. Baltimore free black population also hosted a military network with direct ties through the convention movement to Cleveland, where Brown was also recruiting his army. The African Methodist Episcopal churches and Prince Hall lodges of Philadelphia and Baltimore were historically and institutionally linked, and both were militant and dedicated participants in the Underground Railroad. Brown cultivated allies in Philadelphia, meeting with leaders of the Frank Johnson Guard, a militia company formed by a number of black men with connection of the Underground Railroad. During the summer of 1859, the night before, a grand parade was scheduled in Philadelphia. General J. Simmons of New York and one of Brown's lieutenants made a speech in which he commended the Negroes of Philadelphia for organizing a military company and stated that there was a grand project on floor to invade the South with an army of Northern Negroes and free the slaves. He called for recruits for this invading army from the Negroes of Philadelphia. Later that night, a meeting was held among a dozen local anti-slavery leaders, including Thomas Dorsey, Dr. William Henry Johnson, Frederick Douglass, Fred C. Revels, and John Brown. Brown urged that a more temperate tone be used during speeches the next day, fearing that without secrecy and caution, his plan would be doomed. So, okay, cool. So basically, he was planning a revolt all along. John Brown. Now, John Brown, I'm assuming to be Caucasian, right? He wanted to go in a way where there would be no reform with the government, but just forcibly get those blacks out of slavery. So there were black people who were very radical and who was ready to go to war to abolish slavery and to become free again and be just average human beings. So the purpose is he was meeting with all these different leaders and different organizations, black organizations particularly, to figure out what's the plan and solution and how they're going to go about making this plan work as far as the revolt is concerned. So he figured that he'd do it in secrecy, right? Which he did, but when it was time to put plans to action, then, however, it did not go, it went down south. It went left. It went totally left to where he ended up getting killed and his allies ended up getting killed. So, yeah, you just gotta understand, our ancestors paid the cost of freedom. So they paid the price with their lives. They paid the price for just trying to sacrifice themselves so that way their generation that comes after them wouldn't have to experience what they had to deal with. All right. Let's see, what else can I find? All right. So here it is. I'm going to read right here. It says 4 other named Africans were known to have joined. 4 other named Africans were known to have joined John Brown at Harper's Ferry. Osborne Perry Anderson, 24, was a free-born Pennsylvanian, a printer by trade. He met Brown in Canada. John A. Copeland Jr., 22, was born free in Raleigh, North Carolina, reared in Oberlin, Ohio, and educated at Oberlin College. Okay. Louis S. Larry, a harness maker and Copeland's uncle, was born enslaved in North Carolina and reared in Oberlin. All right. Dangerfield Newby was a freeman from the Shenandoah Valley with ties to the region. Newby's wife and 6 children lived in slavery for about 30 miles south from 30 miles south of Harper's Ferry in Warrenton, Virginia. Harry Newby, a seamstress, was pregnant and about to be sold to a New Orleans trader. Because of his familiarity with the area, Newby lived within the community until the night of the raid, supplying Brown with information. All right. How much local blacks knew about the timing of the raid is uncertain. Benjamin A. Matthews, a Storer College student who lived a generation after the raid, said the local population believed the raid was to be on October 24th, but that the date had been changed after a council by the raiders. During the initial phase of the raid, Brown's men armed 25 to 50 black men. Osborne Anderson distributed pipes to slaves who came with Brown's men from the surrounding plantation, and others who came forward without having had communication with raiders, leading to early reports that the commanders of the raid was a colored man named Anderson. John Edwin Cook and Charles Teed also armed slaves, among whom were several farm hands who had come after hearing of the raid from underground wires. Eyewitness accounts tell of considerable local black activities. Negroes in the early hours of the fight in and around John Brown's fort, and slaves with spears in their hands near the engine house. One hostage said Harper Ferry looked like war. Negroes armed with pikes and sentinels with muskets all around. All right. And then it goes on to say, at least 14 black men assisted at the schoolhouse and protected the weapons of the guarded prisoners. They transported arms from the Kennedy farm to the schoolhouse. Other blacks acted as messengers among Brown's men and spread news of the raid to local community. This result was that many Africans gathered to the scene of action. All right, so if you want to look more into this article, here's some sources right here. Here's the information. Check it out for yourself. That goes into John Brown and his allies. If you want to look up more information about Dangerfield Newby. Oh, my bad. Yeah, if you want to look up more information about Dangerfield Newby, you can check it out for yourself. And here I was reading this paragraph right here. And just go on this website right here and you can find out more information. All right. Okay, so let's go to the final source that I have. So this source is pertaining to slavery in itself, but this goes more into about the price for their pound of flesh, which deals with black women, and it kind of talks about how it's going in the beginning about the partis sequencer ventral. So the partis sequencer ventral again is basically mean that wherever the womb goes, the child will follow. Whoever carries the womb, that's the status. So whatever your mother was, your maternal side, that's what you are, basically. So this is what this source of information is pretty much dealing with black women during slavery. So since we're on the subject about Dangerfield and his wife, who was a slave with 7 children, and she was sold in Louisiana, this kind of go into the aspect of how the women were treated during slavery and what they were doing to the women and things of that nature and whatnot. So let's go ahead and let's look at something real quick. So the price for their pound of flesh. The value of the enslaved from womb to grave in the building of a nation. Diana Remy Berry. All right. Okay, so this is a table of content. All right, the table of content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the introduction and just like read a paragraph from the introduction, and then read a chapter from a paragraph from chapter 1, and that's it. So all right, but these are the table of contents. It says introduction, the value of life and death, the preconception, women and future increase, infancy and childhood. That's chapter 2. Chapter 3, adolescent, young adulthood, and soul values. Chapter 4, midlife and older adulthood. Chapter 5, elderly and supernated. Chapter 6, post mortem, death and ghost values, and the epilogue is afterlife of slavery. All right. And so then you got the note on sources, a history of people and corpses. So basically, again, it goes into the value about women and children and, how much it costs for each slave and whatnot. So, yeah. All right. Let's read this: the value of life and death. All right, so right here, here's a quote: "We are a race of beings who have long labored under the abuse and censor of the world, that we have long been looked upon as an eye of contempt, and that we have long been considered rather as butchish than human and scarcely capable of mental endowment. Just think of a people that hold 4 million of their fellow creatures in chains, 4 million of human beings in chains, and sell them by the pound." All right. Okay, so it says, "Many a man 50 years old had not seen and felt what I had before my 20th year." These are the words of Jordan H. Banks, who was born into slavery, sold 3 times, escaped twice, and ultimately reached freedom. His early years were pleasant compared to those as he matured into adulthood. In his narrative, published in 1861, we learn many things about the value of the enslaved and the ways enslavers, traders, and medical doctors trafficked human chattel from birth to death and beyond. And it says Banks lived on a Virginia plantation with his parents and 15 siblings. His mother served as the cook, and his father was the head man. The family was intact. As a young child, he played with his enslaved son, Alexander, who was just a year older. By age 5, Banks realized that he and Alex was different when his playmate began beating him. Banks fought back because his father warned him that he had to respond to or suffer continued beatings. Embracing this spirit, Banks kept track of how many whippings he owed Alice and returned them blow for blow. Even in childhood, Banks' actions showed a nascent understanding of his soul value separate from his enslaver. As he processed the distinction between himself and his nemesis, Banks experienced another empathy. Alice attended school while he was sent to scarecrows in the fields. In his word, the dreary days of boyhood began in the fields. This moment during enslaved childhood served as a turning point in Banks' understanding of the reality of his condition. Historian Wilma King calls this the quantum leap into the world of work. As they age, enslaved youth and young adults learned and intimately understood their place in the world. Banks' maturation solidified his understanding of enslavement, especially during these pivotal events of youth and early adulthood. The fate of his 2 sisters, the nearly fatal beating of his mother, and the slow death of his enslaver. Of the latter, Banks remarked, "I saw him in life and I saw him in death, but he left me in chains." And now go down to here. It says enslaved adults knew very well that the death of their enslaver often meant the breaking up of their family. Thus, when Banks was put on the auction block in the summer of 1857, he had a message for his potential buyers. He fought the traders and tried to liberate himself by running away. "I gave them evidence that they had a man to deal with, and I determined now to see how they would treat me as a prisoner." During interviews with potential buyers, Banks remained defiant by not revealing information about his health and skills because he knew it would affect the monetary value placed on him. Despite these efforts, he recalled being purchased that day for $1,200. Exploring the ways enslaved people like Banks recall and respond to their monetary value throughout the course of their lives is the primary thrust of this book. In particular, I examine enslaved and occasionally free blacks' values along with the individual who had a vested interest in their physical vitality throughout their lives upon their death and even after death. The intimate relationship between enslavers, physician, and property and human property shows just how commodification, the act of being treated as a commodity, touched every facet of enslaved people's birth, lives, and afterlives. From the enslaved perspective, this knowledge came gradually as they matured. Importantly, this book is also an intellectual history of enslaved people's thoughts, expression, feelings, and reaction to their own commodification. All right, so that's a brief introduction. All right, so let's go into chapter 1. All right, chapter 1 deals with preconception, women and future increase. I surely would be a prophet as the Lord has shown me things that happened before my birth. A tribute to Nat Turner. By American law, the child follows the tradition of its mother. Mother free, children free. Mother slave, slave children. James Redpath. Again, that goes back to the concept of what parties sequencer ventrum. Remember, that's what you call parties sequencer ventrum, which means by American law, the child follows the tradition of his mother. Mother free, children free. Mother slave, children slave. Now, let's get down to it. It says, Adeline reluctantly stepped up on the block and amid a crowd of unfamiliar onlookers. Arms crossed, head covered, she gripped her young son close to her chest to shield him from the spectacle of shame they were about to experience. The audience admired her dark olive skin and her evidence of fecundity. Her 10-week-old son was living proof that she was a childbearing mother. Childbearing woman. Adeline had a very fine forehead, pleasing countenance, and mild, lustrous eyes, while her son was a light-colored, blue-eyed, curly-skin-haired child. Positioned on the Columbia, South Carolina courthouse steps, the two awaited their fate. Gentlemen, did you ever see such a face and head and form as that? The auctioneer inquired, taking off her hood. She is only 18 years old and already has a child who will consequently make a valuable piece of property for someone. The bidder and Adeline struggled with her hood as he praised her skills. She is a splendid housekeeper and seamstress, he continued. By this time, tears filled her eyes, and at every licentious allusion, she cast a look of pity and woe at the auctioneer and at the crowd. As the sale continued, the auctioneer took Adeline's hood off 3 more times to show her countenance, and every time she quickly replaced it. When he was exposed, her son cast a terrified look on the author and bidders, and each time his face was revealed. Perhaps at his young age he sensed his mother's terror. Within minutes, the sale was complete, and Adeline descended the courthouse steps, looked at her new master, looked at the audience, looked fondly to her sweet child's face, and pressed it warmly against her bosom. While the auctioneer jeered, that child wouldn't trouble her purchaser long. The threat of separation followed enslaved people to the auction block. All right. Now, let's get down to here. It says this scene was a common one for childbearing enslaved women in the American South. They went to the market as real and potential mothers. One North Carolina enslaved person, Robert, recalled that his mother was sold 3 times before I was born. She was sold just like a pack of mules. But after Robert was born and she was separated from her baby, she started having fits. Her outburst was so bad that the speculators took her back to the previous enslaver and the money exchange was returned. From then on, Robert's mother was able to remain with her children. Enslaved women like her were valued for their potential and projected procreation, and they knew it. I was worth a heap. Caves, I had so many children, explained Tempest Hardin. The more children a slave had, the more they was worth. The law sanctioned valuing enslaved people before conception and adjust women's market values accordingly. Part of sequencer ventrum. The 1662 Virginia legislation that defined slavery based on the condition of the mother guaranteed enslavement for enslaved women's progeny in all American colonies. Speaking from Speaking in front of the Virginia legislature in January of 1831, Mr. Golson stated Partis sequencer ventrum is coeval with the existence of the right of property itself and is founded in wisdom and justice. He opposed statements by Mr. Clay, who was not entirely comfortable with the notion of breeding for sale. In Golson's estimation, planters were justified in doing so because women missed work to care for their young, and the value of the property justified the expense. Adamantly, he continued, I do not hesitate to say that in its increase consists much of our wealth. Women were valued for their fecundity, and traders made projections based on their future increase. Ooh. Their appraisals were linked to their ability to reproduce. Aside from political debates over breeding, the memories of enslaved children are rife with their mothers' and grandmothers' experiences of being sold. Grandma was a cook and a breeding woman. Wow. Josephine Howe of Arkansas explained, continuing, she was so valuable, they prized her high. She was the mother of 21 children. Molly Williams of Mississippi grew up in a household that divided enslaved children between two enslavers. Her parents had different enslavers, so every time her mother gave birth to a sibling, the enslaver would take turns for ownership of the newborn. Should I read this little last part right here? Yeah. Or should I skip it? I'm gonna skip it. It says the last 4 decades of the 18th century was crucial years for assessing enslaved women monetary values. They set the tone for the years that followed. Black women in early America filled the pages of northern and southern newspapers, and slave sale ads became the subject of legal proceeding, and ownership disputes served as the collateral for loans among debtors and creditors, and commanded strong prices in an evolving domestic market for sound human property. Their monetary value was based on their age, skills, and reproductive status. Some enslavers rejected childbearing women, others preferred them. However, women's capability to bear children, their labor skills, and in some cases, their perceived physical attractiveness remained the primary factors in their inspection, valuation, and sales. But the choice to buy a childbearing, expectant, or current mother depended on the individual buyer's need and desire. That choice also meant that potential buyers put a price tag on enslaved children before conception. And with that being said, this comes from the book called The Price for Their Pound of Flesh. All right. So if you want to check that book out, you're more than welcome to do so. You can find it on PDF, or you can go on any Amazon website. It's called The Value of Enslaved from Womb to the Grave in the Building of a Nation. All right. You can look that up for yourself. Okay. All right, then. So anyways, that'll be all for today. That's really all for today. So let me give my thoughts on this whole thing about the women and the price determined as far as their values is concerned. So the woman was worth more money if she was able to bear children, right? Or if she was expected, than a woman who was not able to bear children. So most slave masters, right, when they went to bid for slaves, they was looking for women, in particular, who can bear children, because the more children they bear, the more properties they have and the more money they invest in. And the more, you gotta understand, see, they looked at it from a business standpoint. They didn't care about the value of the slaves unless they were not unable to do the work. As long as they were able to do the work and be able to bear children and do all these other things, other human qualities, then that's what all that mattered. But until then, as far as their livelihood as human beings, they didn't care about that. All right? They didn't care. So that's how the slave masters operate. They looked at slavery as economics. That's what it was all about, economics. All right? That was the number one thing. That's the number one reason why slavery exists, because of economics. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get off of here. I thank you guys for watching. So with that being said, this is your girl Tiffany. I'm out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you want to share this video, you're more than welcome to do so. Until then, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. Thank you.